Our journey begins in the city of Lodz, Poland, in December of 1907. Here, the young Akiba Rubinstein played what many consider the most beautiful combination in all of chess history, against Georg Rotlewi. Move 1. White plays pawn to d4. Black plays pawn to d5. Move 2. White plays knight from g1 to f3. Black plays pawn to e6. Move 3. White plays pawn to e3. Black plays pawn to c5. Move 4. White plays pawn to c4. Black plays knight from b8 to c6. Move 5. White plays knight from b1 to c3. Black plays knight from g8 to f6. Move 6. White captures the pawn on c5 with the pawn from d4. Black takes the pawn on c5 with the bishop from f8. Move 7. White plays pawn to a3. Black plays pawn to a6. Move 8. White plays pawn to b4. Black plays bishop from c5 to d6. Move 9. White plays bishop from c1 to b2. Black castles kingside. The king tucks away to safety. Move 10. White plays queen from d1 to d2. Black plays queen from d8 to e7. Move 11. White plays bishop from f1 to d3. Black captures the pawn on c4 with the pawn from d5. Move 12. White takes the pawn on c4 with the bishop from d3. Black plays pawn to b5. Move 13. White plays bishop from c4 to d3. Black plays rook from f8 to d8. Move 14. White plays queen from d2 to e2. Black plays bishop from c8 to b7. Move 15. White castles kingside. The king tucks away to safety. Black plays knight from c6 to e5. Move 16. White takes the knight on e5 with the knight from f3. Black takes the knight on e5 with the bishop from d6. Move 17. White plays pawn to f4. Black plays bishop from e5 to c7. Move 18. White plays pawn to e4. Black plays rook from a8 to c8. Move 19. White plays pawn to e5. Black plays bishop from c7 to b6. Check. Move 20. White plays king from g1 to h1. Black plays knight from f6 to g4. Move 21. White plays bishop from d3 to e4. Black plays queen from e7 to h4. Move 22. White plays pawn to g3. Black takes the knight on c3 with the rook from c8. Move 23. White captures the queen on h4 with the pawn from g3. Black plays rook from d8 to d2. Move 24. White takes the rook on d2 with the queen from e2. Black takes the bishop on e4 with the bishop from b7. Check. Move 25. White plays queen from d2 to g2. Black plays rook from c3 to h3. A stunning finish. Rubinstein's queen sacrifice, leaving the queen hanging while rook and bishop deliver the final blow, remains one of the most celebrated moments in chess. Now we travel to London, 1912, where Edward Lasker unleashed one of the most breathtaking king hunts ever seen. After a queen's sacrifice on h7, the Black King is dragged from one side of the board to the other. Move 1, White plays pawn to d4. Black plays pawn to e6. Move 2, White plays knight from g1 to f3. Black plays pawn to f5. Move 3, White plays knight from b1 to c3. Black plays knight from g8 to f6. Move 4, White plays bishop from c1 to g5. Black plays bishop from f8 to e7. Move 5, White takes the knight on f6 with the bishop from g5. Black takes the bishop on f6 with the bishop from e7. Move 6, White plays pawn to e4. Black captures the pawn on e4 with the pawn from f5. Move 7, White takes the pawn on e4 with the knight from c3. Black plays pawn to b6. Move 8, White plays knight from f3 to e5. Black castles kingside. The king tucks away to safety. Move 9, White plays bishop from f1 to d3. Black plays bishop from c8 to b7. Move 10, White plays queen from d1 to h5. Black plays queen from d8 to e7. Move 11, White takes the pawn on h7 with the queen from h5. Check. Black takes the queen on h7 with the king from g8. Move 12, White takes the bishop on f6 with the knight from e4. Check. Black plays king from h7 to h6. Move 13, White plays knight from e5 to g4. Check. Black plays king from h6 to g5. Move 14, White plays pawn to h4. Check. Black plays king from g5 to f4. Move 15, White plays pawn to g3. Check. Black plays king from f4 to f3. Move 16, White plays bishop from d3 to e2. Check. Black plays king from f3 to g2. Move 17, White plays rook from h1 to h2. Check. Black plays king from g2 to g1. Move 18, White plays king from e1 to d2. Check. And that is checkmate. The king, lured from h7 all the way to g1, finds no escape. A remarkable journey across the entire board, ending in checkmate. Our final game tonight takes us to Breslau, also in 1912, where the great Frank Marshall played what is sometimes called the most beautiful move in chess history, queen to g3, leaving the queen where it can be captured 3 different ways, yet none of them works. Move 1, White plays pawn to d4. Black plays pawn to e6. Move 2, White plays pawn to e4. Black plays pawn to d5. Move 3, White plays knight from b1 to c3. Black plays pawn to c5. Move 4, White plays knight from g1 to f3. Black plays knight from b8 to c6. Move 5, White captures the pawn on d5 with the pawn from e4. Black captures the pawn on d5 with the pawn from e6. Move 6. White plays bishop from f1 to e2. Black plays knight from g8 to f6. Move 7. White castles kingside. The king tucks away to safety. Black plays bishop from f8 to e7. Move 8. White plays bishop from c1 to g5. Black castles kingside. The king tucks away to safety. Move 9. White captures the pawn on c5 with the pawn from d4. Black plays bishop from c8 to e6. Move 10. White plays knight from f3 to d4. Black takes the pawn on c5 with the bishop from e7. Move 11. White takes the bishop on e6 with the knight from d4. Black captures the knight on e6 with the pawn from f7. Move 12. White plays bishop from e2 to g4. Black plays queen from d8 to d6. Move 13. White plays bishop from g4 to h3. Black plays rook from a8 to e8. Move 14. White plays queen from d1 to d2. Black plays bishop from c5 to b4. Move 15. White takes the knight on f6 with the bishop from g5. Black takes the bishop on f6 with the rook from f8. Move 16. White plays rook from a1 to d1. Black plays queen from d6 to c5. Move 17. White plays queen from d2 to e2. Black takes the knight on c3 with the bishop from b4. Move 18. White captures the bishop on c3 with the pawn from b2. Black takes the pawn on c3 with the queen from c5. Move 19. White takes the pawn on d5 with the rook from d1. Black plays knight from c6 to d4. Move 20. White plays queen from e2 to h5. Black plays rook from e8 to f8. Move 21. White plays rook from d5 to e5. Black plays rook from f6 to h6. Move 22. White plays queen from h5 to g5. Black takes the bishop on h3 with the rook from h6. Move 23. White plays rook from e5 to c5. Black plays queen from c3 to g3. And with that legendary queen move, we rest. 3 brilliant attacks from over a century ago, still shining as brightly as ever. Good night.